What's up, everybody? This is a long overdue video, one that I promised a while back to a guy that had dropped a comment below, but just now getting to it. One of the questions he asked was what kind of hardware we needed to tune this truck, and basically what I got is the efilive side. This is what I recommend. I tried the HP tuner stuff and it works. It has certain advantages, but if I were to pick one right now, this is December of 2020, 2021, I would pick the efilive over the HP tuners, just because it has some features and this is more convenient to use. It's easier to use. But this is what you need: the efilive flash scan. I have the V3. I don't know anything about the V2, but don't get the AutoCal. The efilive flash scan is the one you need. The AutoCal is for basically tuners to sell you, and then you just take it and you plug it in your truck and you install whatever tune that the tuner put onto this thing. This is what the tuner would use to make a tune, basically. So with this, you can create your own tunes and whatnot and modify and upload and download, make changes to your truck. With AutoCal, it's just load whatever's on here, whatever the tuner put on here, and you're stuck with that. If you want to make changes with an AutoCal, you have to send the file back to the tuner, tell him what you want to change. He'll send you a new file, you upload it onto this, and then you put it on your truck. But you don't have the capability of changing anything yourself. That's, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how this works. The cables you'll need are, you have basically your OBD2, this plugs into your truck. The other side of this is like a 10-pin connector, and it plugs into the top of this guy. There's a couple ports on here. Some of them do various things, but I've only used that 10-pin. And then the one on the right there, that USB to USB-B. There is also a USB-A on the bottom of this. I think that's for efilive at the factory or something like that. I don't know what exactly it's for, but never used it. The other cable you'll need is this one. It's just a standard USB on one end, and then, like I said, the USB-B on the other end. This is like what you would find in a printer typically, but you'll need that to hook this guy up to your laptop. So yeah, this one goes to your truck, that one goes to your laptop. But yeah, I guess we'll get into tuning the transmission, the 6L50, and some of the stuff. This isn't going to be like a step-by-step guide or anything. This is basically just going to show you what kind of parameters efilive gives you and some of the stuff that you're going to be changing when you go into the transmission side.
Alright everybody, so this is the efilive scan and tune. This is the window that pops up when you open it up. You can download this off of efilive's website for free, or basically the software is free. They charge you for the efilive flash scan and the cables and stuff like that. But you can see I got a bunch of tunes in here. Previously, or in a previous video, I stated that you needed version 7, which is this one here, and version 8 to tune this truck. But last October, efilive dropped an update that allows you to tune both these controllers, the E98 and the T43, in version 8. So previously, the E98, the engine computer, wasn't available in version 8, so you had to have version 7, which is why I still have it, but I use everything exclusively in version 8 now. So we'll jump into T43 here, which is the engine computer, or I'm sorry, the transmission computer. E98 is the engine computer. We'll open this up and get in here. This is basically some stuff here about your truck, and then you can go into edit, and there is no operating system change for the transmission control. You can lock it if you want, but diagnostic stuff, if you want to enable some diagnostic stuff. But basically these are the main, actually these two are the main two you're going to look at when you go to transmit or change your transmission tune. So we'll jump right into it here. First one, shift control. There's different patterns basically. There's a normal shift mode, which is pretty self-explanatory. That's just you put it in drive and go. Pattern A, it depends upon your truck what pattern A and pattern B does. In my truck, I have a two-wheel drive truck. So pattern A is tow haul for me. And then there's also a pattern B, but pattern B for me is blanked out. There's just all the tables are maxed out. So I believe this would be, for instance, if you had like a four-wheel drive truck, and I think this would be like your four-wheel drive table, maybe a four-low table or something like that. But I can't speak to that because I don't have one of those. So that table is just maxed out for me. It's not used. But these two tables, one is, like I said, just normal shifts, and the other one's tow haul. So you can adjust each shift independently. These are my numbers. You can see it's got the 1-2 shift, 2-3, and so forth. Again, downshift, second to first, third to second, fourth to third, yada yada. And then you got TPS over here, whatever your desired throttle position is, wherever your foot's at, is where it's going to shift. So I like to set it up about to where it downshifts about 3 miles an hour less than where it upshifts at. So if you look at my fifth to sixth here, it'll shift into sixth at 37% throttle at 60 miles an hour, and it'll downshift out of sixth into fifth at 57 miles an hour. So 3 miles an hour less. I say at least a bare minimum of 2, depending upon where it's at in the shift range. But 3 has worked out pretty well for me for the most part. Now when you're off the throttle and you're just slowing down, you're coming up to a stoplight or something like that, you can set it up a little bit more aggressively to where it downshifts later. The truck has to slow down to 35 miles an hour instead of 38 before it'll downshift into fourth. So that means the RPMs are going to be less, and it'll downshift. I have it downshift in about 1,000, 1,200 RPMs. I let it get down pretty low when I'm completely off the throttle. That way it doesn't, like throw you forward every time it downshifts. But when you give it some gas, give it just a little bit, and it'll change it, and it'll bump it up to more reasonable. This would be probably like 1,400 RPMs. I don't know the exact RPM number for each one of these because this whole controller is based off mile an hour. So 100% throttle. You can set this up basically to whatever RPM range. You just do the math on that. The next big part is going to be torque converter. So you want to set this also has obviously pattern A and pattern B and stuff like that too. Your normal TCC lockup. So I don't have my torque converter locked up in first. I apply it in second at 15 miles an hour. You can see at light throttle, the first second gear, it'll kick into second gear at 9, 10, 11 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour, but I don't have it lock up until 15 miles an hour. So I wait for that 1-2 shift to happen, and then I kick in the second gear or the lockup. As far as third, fourth, and fifth, and all these gears go, I'm basically doing lock shifts. I don't have it set up that way. If you go into parameters and there's a lock shift, I got it set to no. You can turn it on. I've tried that. It doesn't really do anything from what I could tell, because if you have your settings, if you have your tables set up to where it's going to be locked during that shift, it feels exactly the same. So for instance, 6 gear apply at say 31 miles an hour is at 56 RPM or 56 miles an hour. But if you go to 6 gear, it doesn't shift there until 58. So I got everything set up and my torque converter 2 miles an hour sooner. So The torque converter is going to apply at 56, but it's not going to be in that gear until it's at 58. So I have noticed also that these numbers don't actually coincide with the actual mile an hour that you shift. So it'll command the shift at 58 miles an hour, but it won't actually do the shift until probably like 60. So keep that in mind, but that you'll see that in the logger when you start doing some scans and logging that sort of stuff. So just look at your mile an hour and then compare to whatever RPM you want it to have it shift at. There's some other stuff in here. Let's see. For instance, I already talked about patterns, tap up, tap down stuff. I haven't really messed with any of this. It's maxed out anyway. So hot shifts. If your transmission fluid gets hot, it's going to shift at this RPM or the speeds. Tap up, tap down. Wide open throttle shift speeds. So this is basically just the wide open throttles from all these tables. If you look at, it's basically these numbers here going across. For instance, my 1-2 shift happens at 22 miles an hour, wide open throttle. So my 1-2 shift, 22 miles an hour, wide open throttle. So pretty self-explanatory there. Just copy and paste your table into that. As far as wide open throttle shift RPM, this is basically a cap to it, so it won't actually, it doesn't look at this table. The way I have figured it uses this tables or these numbers as like basically an RPM limiter. So if, say, you have it shift do the 1-2 shift at whatever mile an hour equals 4,400 RPMs. If it hits 5,400 RPMs, it'll hit a limiter. So say I want my 1-2 shift to happen at 4,400, and I set it up in here for whatever speed that is. I forget what it was, 22. Yeah, 22 miles an hour is probably 4,400. If it hits 50 or 4,500 RPMs, it's going to hit like a limiter in there. So you just want to set these numbers up just slightly above whatever the shift number is. You can see my pattern B is in a table. So these tables aren't available to me because I don't have the features in my truck to utilize them. So you can set your RPM limits. I recommend like the 1-2 shift. It happens pretty quick. It sweeps through the RPM range really quick. So you can set that up pretty high on these motors. 4,500. Some people might scream, like, hey, this is a diesel. You can't rev it out. I have a stock motor, stock rods in it. Stock crank, stock pistons, all that. This is not a built motor by any means, but you can rev it out. That I've had success. I haven't blown anything up, shifting it at that speed in first gear that we're doing the 1-2 shift, because like I said, it sweeps through the first gear so fast that it doesn't spend hardly any time at this RPM. The 2-3 shift, 4,500 RPMs, like I said, second gear sweeps through that pretty quick too. You start getting into the third gear, I'm pulling it down. I'm having it shift at 4,000, 4,100, especially as it gets even higher than that. 4,000 is pretty safe. That's where the stock rev limiter is in this truck, is 4,000. So I feel pretty comfortable having it shift at that RPM. Yeah, and then the 5-6 shift is even lower. So I don't race this truck. This truck's never been on a racetrack, so never. I don't know how you would set that up. You can just do some logs and set your tables up to make it shift wherever you want to. But as far as like a race setting, I can't give you any of those numbers. I've never done it. But this is a street truck for me, so these are the numbers that coincide to whatever or how I drive it, basically. So shift times, we'll get into some other tables here. Basically, this is like desired time in seconds of how quick you want it to happen. Depending upon the torque, this is in Newton meters. 600 Newton meters is like 420, 440 foot-pounds or something like that. And then RPM. So as the RPMs go up, you have to give it more time to shift. Otherwise, you're going to break something. You know, if there's not a whole lot of RPM, you can, you know, shift it sooner because it doesn't have, it's not trying to slow down as much mass because it's not spinning as fast. But as you get the RPMs up and you really get that stuff whipping around, you got to give it more time. Otherwise, you're going to break something. And then, obviously, in the lower torque numbers, you can give it more time to just smooth it out and make this stuff um, shift better. I've never really messed with these tables. These are pretty much the stock settings. So um, the one you really want to look at if you're trying to adjust how hard it shifts is this inertia table. You can see the 1-2 shift. Now this isn't a locked shift. I don't have my torque converter locking up in first gear, so you can get a little bit more aggressive with this this shift. Um, these numbers coincide with it's basically just a random number. It's not an actual number that the computer logs or you can see. It's basically just a 9 is firmer than a 3. So you can see the maximum value you can put in there is 15.9 or 16 or whatever. I tried putting 10 in here once, and I thought I was going to break my drive shaft. So I don't recommend going any higher than about a 9. A 9's pretty firm, but if you need, you know, the torque, or if you need it to shift firm at this torque value and this RPM, you can get away with that. But like I said, the 1-2 shift, you're not going to get this much torque in the first gear because it sweeps through it so fast that you really can't load it unless you're like on a dyno or something like that. It's really the only situation you can put that much load, or if you're like trying to do burnout or something, I guess. You can really get that load up there in first gear. But second gear it locks up in second gear, so you can see my shifting because this is a lock shift. So you can see it takes a lot more to really get into the firm shifts. Basically, my normal driving around, you know, 2600 RPMs and lower, it's pretty soft. It's I like to have a smooth transmission when I'm cruising around town. I don't want it banging gears everywhere. But if I give it some gas and get the RPMs up, you know, make some torque, you know, it'll firm up the shifts, and you can have your cake and eat it too, basically. Um, shift pressures. I haven't really messed with these tables. Again, it has a pattern A, pattern B stuff. Pattern A is normal mode. I wish they would like make the nomenclature the same, how they have like normal A and B, and then you go in here and it's like it's pattern A, pattern B, pattern C. You know, I wish they would standardize that a little bit more, but you know, you get what you get. Pattern A, base pressure. This is literally the PSI that's given to the transmission, depending upon torque, however much torque the engine's making, and what the temperature of the transmission fluid is. So transmission fluid temperature. I adjusted or scaled these a little bit different because it did have it at like 68 degrees to 257. That was like the 68 was in this column, and then this number was like, I don't know, 32 or something like that. So I gave it's going to spend most of its time in this range. I just like to have an upper end in case the transmission fluid does get hot. I can reduce the pressure in the transmission. So that'll hopefully cool it off sooner. If it's not, you know, trying to make 200 psi of line pressure, then you know, maybe it'll cool off the fluid a little bit faster. At least that's my thought process. I don't know if it works or not. I've never had the transmission overheat, so never tested it. But in theory, yeah, in my brain, that makes sense, and that's what it should do. So still enough pressure to be able to hold the gear if it does get up that high. But you know, if your transmission's that hot, you should probably slow down and whatever you're doing. You should probably stop doing that and you know, keep from burning up your transmission. So yeah, I'll close that. Shift pressures, engine RPM pressure limiter. Yeah, basically, yeah, normal stuff. This is the max pressure that you can run. This is in kPa, but PSI. 105 is the max pressure. You can run in that gear. So, anywho, torque limits per gear. So a 6L50. If you look it up, the 6L50 is rated at 500 newton meters of torque. So this table from the factory is 500. All these numbers are 500. You can raise it up, as I did here. In 5th and 6th gear, you can see I just added just a tick more, 50 newton meters, just a couple more. But up top, 650. So this really helps you keep the torque out of it down low. There's more of this on the engine side than the transmission side. There's only one table on the transmission side for this, but I like to have this mirror my engine side as well. So just make sure they're the same as your engine side. And yeah, you can keep your numbers, keep you from making too much torque down low. That's how you break transmissions. Adaptive learning, pretty self-explanatory. I've never messed with any of these tables, but it just, I don't even know how these tables work, so I can't really speak to it. But this is the adaptive learning stuff. That's how you, if you have a problem with how your transmission's learning the way you drive, like if the way you drive is outside of the computer's limits from learning how to use it, you can go in here and probably adjust these tables and make it more suitable to the way you drive. But if it's like a full race truck, you should probably go in there and mess with that stuff. Self-cleaning, that's, whatever. Speedo, if you change your tire size or your gear ratio in the rear axle, you can change these numbers. So that's pretty much everything in the transmission side of things. Like I said, the tables that you're going to be using the most are these two tables. So the part throttle shift, you're going to go in there and adjust these numbers. These are the numbers I use for my new turbo. This is the tune I'm currently using right now, driving it around, and I haven't had a problem with it. Down low throttle positions, when I'm shifting into 6th gear, only the 5/6 shifts. I could probably raise this up to like 53, 54 miles an hour because it does surge just a touch, but it's like under such little load, I'm not worried about it. Basically, if I'm down here, it's like, okay, I got up to speed and I'm doing like 60 miles an hour, like 55 miles an hour. My normal acceleration is like 31 to 43% throttle range, and like I'll get up to speed and it's like, okay, now I want it to shift into 6th, so I'll let off the throttle a little bit, get down in here into 52, and it'll click into 6th, and then I can get back on the throttle because it's not going to downshift until 50% throttle, at that range. So I would have to really get on it for it to drop down to, or 55, I'm sorry, 31. So that's pretty much it. Just make sure your converter numbers are like a couple, if you want to do lock shifts like I do, just make sure they are a couple mile an hour below your shift speed. Otherwise, you're going to go out there, you're going to load the tune in the truck, go out for a test drive, and be like, oh man, I forgot to do that. Why is it acting so weird? So just, I've done it 100 times. That's why I'm telling you. Make sure these numbers match or are changed as well. Anytime you change this number, you have to change this table as well. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions for the transmission side of things, let me know, and I'll try to answer them for you. If anybody has any advice for me that knows more about this than I do, let me know, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. But have a good one.
Also, just want to throw out there, if you guys want to stick around for this channel, I got some mods coming up. As you can see, this is for the 2.8. Both of these are the head studs. Apparently ARP just came out with some main cap studs too, or for the crankshaft. So I'm waiting for those to drop. If you go on their website, it says they have them, but you can't buy them, so nobody can get them yet. They're coming out eventually, but I don't know when I can get to this. I'm trying to find a spare motor or an extra motor to put together, and go from there, so I don't have to pull mine out, and that way the truck's not down forever. But yeah, working on these, so stay tuned for that.